A young boy sat quietly by a river, fishing in peace, until a mysterious wizard appeared before him. The old man offered to teach him the art of magic. Though confused, the boy eagerly accepted the chance to learn. The wizard, known as Mahilia Elders, began training his new pupil with strict focus, telling him that one day he would have companions who might fall into danger, and when that time came, he would need to rely on magic to protect them. Elders explained that magic was the art of holding the very air one breathed and transforming it into something special. When the boy released his first spell and struck the target, a bright smile spread across his face. Though the training had been exhausting, he was filled with pride. Elders was impressed, noting that most people took a month to master such a spell. Still, he decided that was enough for the day. The boy, impatient and eager to learn more, pouted, but Elders reminded him that rushing only spoiled the results. To clear the boy's mind, the master suggested they catch a fish before sunset. As they fished together, the teacher proved far less skilled with a rod than with a wand. When he struggled to reel one in, the boy couldn't hold back his laughter. After a brief struggle, they both fell onto their backs, laughing under the fading light. The next day, the boy, Alec Ygret, was seen studying hard, struggling to understand a magical formula. Elders assured him that once he understood the pattern behind it, everything would come naturally. Hours passed as they studied, the bond between them deepening through their shared effort. When snow began to fall, the two ended up in a playful snowball fight. Alec loved the peaceful days he spent with his mentor. But that peace didn't last. One day, Elders told Alec he was leaving the capital. He advised his student that if he ever had the chance to become a court mage, he should refuse it. Alec couldn't understand why. Elders revealed that Alec's late mother had once done him a great favor, and teaching the boy was his way of repaying her kindness. Years later, Alec studied at the Royal Academy of Magic, where he discovered that his master, Elders, had once been the Academy's most promising graduate. But after becoming a court mage, Elders had been banished. Alec realized that this was the reason behind his mentor's sad eyes. From that day, Alec vowed to change how the court worked, hoping to repay his master's kindness. To do that, he first needed to become a court mage himself. However, fate had far crueler plans. After years of effort, Alec finally became one of the kingdom's court magicians, only to be expelled by Prince Regulus of the Kingdom of Galina. His fellow teammates laughed at his dismissal. They mocked him for being weak, a mage who only cast defense and support spells while others charged forward into battle. Regulus called him a coward, unworthy of his title, and tore away his robe, stripping him of his position and pride. Alec was left in shock as his former comrades walked away, yet he didn't give up. He continued studying, determined to grow stronger and make up for his weaknesses. He even tried to help Regulus indirectly by learning the magic the prince lacked. But when Alec attempted to re-enter the capital, the guards blocked him, explaining that he was no longer a court mage, just another commoner. Soon his former teammate Lainey appeared and reinforced the guard's words. She mocked him again, claiming that despite his achievements at the academy, he was still a worthless braggart. When Alec handed her a letter for the king, hoping to explain himself, she tore it to pieces before his eyes. As the gates of the capital closed behind her, Alec's last hope vanished. Standing alone on the street, Alec reflected on his years of service. He whispered a silent apology to his old master for failing to reform the court. Just as despair consumed him, an old friend appeared. It was Yora Eisens, the cheerful companion he hadn't seen in 4 years. She embraced him warmly, happy to see her friend again. Upon hearing Alec's story, she expressed relief that he had left the corrupt royal court. Yora reminded him of the promise she once made, to recruit him into her own team someday. Without hesitation, she offered him a place in her group, Eternal Period, inviting him to join their adventures once more. Though hesitant at first, Alec accepted, moved by her faith in him. Together, they set out toward the city of dungeons, Fizzle. During their journey, Alec dreamt of Elda's words reminding him not to become a court mage. The carriage shook over rough terrain, waking him. Yora smiled and told him to rest. Their journey was still long. Meanwhile, in the capital, Prince Regulus learned that Alec had left the kingdom. Lady reported that he'd been gone for 5 days and was rumored to have become an adventurer. Regulus dismissed him as a coward, relieved to replace him with a noble named Loki Silveria from Duke Fornius' house. He believed that with Loki's help, they'd conquer the next dungeon with ease and spread Regulus's fame across the world. Far from the capital, Alec and Yorha arrived in Fizzle, where Eternal Period had its base. Before joining their expedition, Alec needed to register at the Adventurers Guild. However, the receptionist informed him that he lacked the required pass, a license to explore dungeons above level 30. Only those registered for at least 2 years could acquire it. Yora was frustrated, realizing that her teammate Kra had promised to handle it but failed due to her reckless attitude. Unable to register, Yora blamed herself but quickly brushed it off. The team was already exploring level 52 dungeons and couldn't afford to wait 2 years. Determined not to waste time, she suggested they explore weaker dungeons nearby. She welcomed Alec to Fizzle, ready to begin their next adventure together. That night, they ventured into a forest swarming with flying insects. Yora activated an enhancement spell, boosting Alec's speed and strength. He charged forward, striking enemies with precision, but the swarm grew larger by the second. When Yora moved ahead to defend them, Alec realized his magic had weakened after years of emotional strain. Still, seeing his friend in danger reignited his determination. He focused his mind and unleashed a massive fire spell that burned through the swarm. With his confidence returning, Alec fought alongside Yorha, their teamwork flowing effortlessly. When the situation worsened, he summoned a rain of lightning that annihilated the remaining insects. But their fight wasn't over yet. A giant earthworm burst from the ground, snatching Yorha's scepter with its massive jaws. Working in perfect sync, Alec and Yora prepared their counterattack. As she shielded herself from the flames, Alec unleashed a fire tornado that engulfed the creature entirely, turning it to ash. Their teamwork earned them a decisive victory. Yora praised Alec's strength, happy to see that he hadn't changed. Later, in another dungeon, the team faced a massive hydra. The lancer's spear failed to pierce its thick shell, forcing the archer to shoot an arrow to save him. The hydra countered with powerful fireballs and electric blasts, which Yora blocked using walls of ice and earth. But the relentless assault began to wear her down. Just when things looked dire, Alec stepped forward and unleashed an overwhelming spell and obliterated the hydra in seconds. With that, the group cleared the 68th floor, breaking the dungeon's record. As they celebrated, the four adventurers raised their hands high, shouting the name of their group, Eternal Period, the team determined to write an everlasting story. After toppling the level 68 boss, the group returned to the academy amid roaring cheers. News of their feat spread instantly. They had accomplished what no class before them had achieved. Rosa watched them with a mixture of pride and disbelief. Their movements were seamless, their decisions instinctive, and their trust in one another absolute. Though their armor was dented and their bodies bore fresh cuts, their expressions radiated quiet triumph. They had shattered the old record. The previous best had barely reached the 32nd floor, making their victory something the Academy would remember for years. Graduation arrived in a swirl of excitement and nostalgia. Rosa announced the final rankings with a proud smile. Rain placed fourth, her steady persistence finally rewarded. Krasia came third, her command of 2 magics earning grudging respect from even the sternest instructors. Yora took second, praised for calm leadership and unshakable defense. And at the top stood Alec, valedictorian, record holder, and the highest-scoring student in Academy history. Applause thundered. The four laughed and teased Rosa, the same banter from their Academy days, and Rosa pretended to scold them, though her eyes shone with pride. As they left the gates together, other students watched in quiet awe, convinced they had witnessed the birth of a legendary party. But a surprise followed. Shortly after graduation, Alec announced he would not pursue a life of wandering. He intended to serve as a court magician, seeking stability, safety, and a way to contribute through knowledge rather than constant danger. His teammates were stunned and a little disappointed, but they understood. Adventure was unpredictable and often short. They respected Alec's choice, trusting his talent would still shape the world. Years passed. The world changed, and so did they, though one promise endured. Yora's vowed to reunite the team. That promise came true when she and Alec met in a lively tavern at the city's edge. They toasted old memories, and Yorha, with her famously low tolerance, was drunk after a single glass. She launched into a rant about being barred from deep dungeon expeditions and promptly slumped across the bench mid-sentence. The sight tugged at something inside him. It reminded him of celebrations at the academy, when Yorha would drink too much and scold the others for holding her back. The peaceful moment broke when an arrogant patron at a nearby table began taunting Alec, calling court magicians cowards and overrated. Obsessed with his own grind set, he sneered at everyone. Alec ignored him until the man, losing temper, swung a bottle at Alec's head. Alec didn't flinch. A faint gesture summoned a shimmering mana shield that absorbed the blow. The attacker froze, then smirked and revealed he had recognized Alec. He claimed he wanted to test him. An adventurer's pass slid onto the table, an apology with a condition. Alec would have to prove his strength to claim it. Yora woke groggy and blurted the man's name. It was Leviel, the guild master. Alec was astonished. Why would Leviel, the guild's head, go out of his way? Leviel only grinned and led them to the guild's underground training hall, a vast chamber for rank trials. Once an S-rank mage, Leviel was notorious for brutal evaluations. Though reluctant, Alec agreed to the spar. Yora warned against fighting after drinking, but Alec waved it away. He still had mana. Leviel's demand was simple. Impress me. The spar began. Alec opened with thunder, lightning arsed and filled the chamber. Leviel countered with water, bending each bolt with fluid motions. Alec closed the distance and switched to close combat, but Leviel reinforced his body with mana and moved faster than Alec could track. A single punch shattered Alec's barrier and hurled him against the wall. Silence stretched. Leviel expected Alec to yield. Instead, Alec rose, dust falling from his shoulders. Alec recognized the truth. He faced a genuine S-rank warrior, but the realization liberated rather than intimidated him. After years of court rules and defensive constraints, he could now fight without holding back. Leviel urged him on. When Leviel moved in, the trap detonated, stunning him long enough for Alec to land a precise slash. Leviel only laughed and activated dragon-scale gauntlets that amplified strength and accelerated regeneration. His next blow cracked the stone beneath them. Alec narrowly avoided the worst and retaliated with more thunder, but the gauntlets allowed Leviel to shrug off the lightning and press forward. The hall shook as they clashed, Alec's speed and cunning against Leviel's relentless force. Alec realized the gauntlets gave Leviel near-endless stamina. He fought to create an opening and then pushed with a rapid barrage. Leviel blocked everything, taunting until his temper snapped and he slammed both fists into the floor, sending a shockwave that covered them in dust. When the dust settled, Alec still stood barely. His mana was spent and his legs trembled. He collapsed. Yora rushed to him, her healing magic glowing as she stabilized him. Rain arrived moments later, furious that Leviel had used full strength on an unranked opponent. Leviel brushed off the complaint. This had been a test, and Alec had passed. Rain carried Alec to a rest chamber. He walked slowly, and they spoke quietly of the years since the academy. Their reunion was brief. A guild attendant summoned Leviel away for urgent business. After Leviel left, Yora recounted what had happened to Alec in the court. Rain's face hardened as she learned Alec's former party had treated him as little more than a pack mule, forcing him to carry equipment, forbidding offensive spells, and casting him out despite his saving the crown prince during an ambush. The injustice stoked her anger until she smashed a bottle on the table. The crash jolted Alec awake. He managed a faint smile. Yora then announced that Leviel had allowed Alec to return to dungeon runs. Alec breathed easier, though pale from the earlier fight. Rain, however, wanted revenge to humiliate the prince's party for their slights. Alec refused outright. He would not stoop to forbidden retaliation. He wanted to adventure freely with comrades he trusted, not settle scores. Rain cooled, and a different plan took shape. Rather than petty vengeance, she proposed they become the strongest party in the world, untouchable and respected. Alec agreed. This goal was not born of spite but of purpose, strength that protected them and proved who they were. Elsewhere in the guild infirmary, the injured S-rank adventurer Krista received treatment. Leviel called an emergency meeting and summoned all A-rank teams for a rescue on the 64th floor. The situation was dire. Krejja visited Alec afterward. Her dual temperament had mellowed. She was steady now. Alec asked why she hadn't joined the meeting. She replied with a smirk and a reminder that he remained officially unranked. With a flick, she healed his remaining wounds, leaving him to wonder why Krista had needed bandages if Krejja's magic was so potent. Soon, Yora and Rain returned, buzzing with urgency. On the 64th floor, magic had become ineffective. Potions were essential. The S-rank team had been nearly wiped out, and Krista barely escaped to summon help. Alec asked whether Krejja would volunteer. She bristled at Rain for signing her up without permission, but the dispute was short. Yora reminded them that Alec would face the main boss, and the decision rested with him. Alec accepted without hesitation. They assembled at the massive dungeon gate. Tension braided with anticipation as the doors began to open. Rain looked back at her friends and declared that this mission would mark the beginning of their legend. They arrived at the dungeon entrance, a place where healing and magic were nullified, forcing them to rely solely on potions and agility. Krejja's teammates were trapped near the level 64 boss, but clearing every floor first would take far too long. Rain pointed this out, yet Yora revealed a crystal given by Krejja, an artifact capable of teleporting them straight to level 64. Alec immediately recognized it as a rare item, but Krejja's only concern was saving her guildmates. Yora warned that the level 64 boss was undead, rendering Krejja's support magic ineffective. Alec would have to handle most of the fight. Rain advised Alec to conserve his mana and let him handle the weaker enemies, not wanting Alec exhausted before the boss. Krejja reminded them that this dungeon was synonymous with death. Even S-ranked adventurers had perished here. Instead of fear, Rain's excitement only grew. With determination burning in their eyes, Yora threw the crystal into the air, and in an instant, the group was teleported to level 64, a dark cavern where skeletal warriors rose from the ground, weapons clutched in bony hands. Rain drew his black spear and charged into the horde, cutting them down effortlessly. Too easy, he muttered with a grin. More skeletons emerged, but he continued slashing through them without hesitation. Yora grew worried when he moved beyond her support range, but Krasia reassured her, confident in Rain's skill and his indestructible artifact spear. Alec offered to help, but Rain just laughed and kept fighting like it was child's play. Alec followed calmly until he suddenly sensed a strange presence behind him. Instinctively, he fired a lightning bolt, but when the dust cleared, nothing was there. Then his instincts flared again. He drew his sword and slashed through the air, meeting unexpected resistance. A dark figure materialized before him, the Grim Reaper. Rain smirked, saying he'd sensed it too but wasn't good with invisible foes. The Reaper struck first, forcing Alec backward. It attacked again, and Alec barely deflected before leaping beside Rain. For the first time in years, he felt the trust of a comrade at his side. That feeling reignited his spirit. With renewed energy, Alec's magic sword glowed as he launched upward, slicing clean through the Reaper. Its form shattered into mist and vanished. As silence fell, Alec realized Yora had known about Rain's reckless plan all along. She apologized while Krasia revealed it was Rain's idea in the first place. Alec simply smiled, silently promising to repay their trust. Rain shrugged, reminding them that they still had to survive the dungeon. The four regrouped. Rain and Alec led the charge, cutting through waves of undead while Yora strengthened them with magic. Krasia supported from behind, loosing precise arrows that covered Rain's wild charges. When the skeleton tide grew overwhelming, Alec commanded them to fall back and unleashed a massive thunderbolt that obliterated the horde in one devastating strike. When the dust cleared, Rain asked why Alec only used thunder magic. He remembered Alec once wielded many elements at the academy. Alec brushed it off, saying thunder was the fastest to cast, but Rain sensed there was more to it and let it go. A monstrous roar echoed through the cavern, likely the boss. After Yora reinforced everyone with strengthening spells, Rain dashed forward faster than lightning, with Alec and the two women close behind. They entered a wide chamber where a massive creature was chasing a bulky adventurer. Alec prepared to help, but Rain immediately recognized him, Loki of the Rechroma party, infamous for his arrogance. Krasia confirmed it, calling him a cunning support magician, though Alec doubted it as Loki stumbled and screamed for help. Rain ignored him until Loki tripped, seemingly doomed. Alec moved to assist, but Krasia stopped him. This was Loki's trick. A trap spell activated beneath the monster, erupting in molten lava. A chain of traps followed, bombarding the creature with searing flames. Krasia admitted Loki lived up to his reputation. Loki laughed triumphantly, but the monster's roar silenced him as it charged a massive blast. Realizing he was seconds from death, Loki braced for impact, but Rain intervened, saving him the nick of time. Loki stared in disbelief as Alec and the others joined the fight. When the monster struck at Alec, Yora raised her shield, blocking the blow so Alec could counter with thunder magic. The creature roared and turned on Rain and Loki. Alec fired another bolt to slow it down, but it barely staggered. Seeing the danger, Rain dashed forward, sliding beneath its legs to draw its attention while hurling Loki toward Krasia for safety. Yora ordered Krasia to guard him while she reinforced Rain. Once Loki was secured, Yora infused Rain with a surge of power. Empowered and fearless, Rain charged straight at the creature, dodging its attacks and leaping high to strike its face with his spear. The monster thrashed violently, flinging him aside. As it loomed for the killing blow, Yora raised a barrier, shielding him just in time. The brief reprieve let Rain rise again, ready for the final stand. Alec, regaining composure, began weaving magic circles around the monster, 5 at first, then 10, and finally 20. Loki watched in disbelief, knowing that even 3 were difficult to maintain. Rain bought him precious seconds, stabbing deep into the beast's tail. When Alec completed his spell, a storm of thunderbolts erupted, paralyzing the creature. Alec moved in to finish it, but the monster dodged and began charging its own spell. Krasia unleashed a blinding flash while Yora bound it with chains of light. Rain seized the moment, hurling his spear like a javelin that pierced straight through its skull. Even mortally wounded, the beast tried one last desperate attack. Alec stood firm. Channeling his master's secret technique, he invoked reflection magic. The monster's dark blast struck his barrier and rebounded with double force. Incredibly, the creature still clung to life. Determined to end it, Alec combined reflection magic with multiple circles, trapping the beast in a blazing inferno that reduced it to ashes. Rain finished it with a clean strike, slicing its head in half. Their brief celebration ended when Loki approached, thanking Alec and recognizing him as the former court magician. Alec admitted he had left long ago, and Loki replied that it was the prince's loss. Then smirking, he revealed that the creature they'd slain wasn't the real floor boss, just a sub-boss that chased him and got separated. The group froze in shock. The true boss was still deeper inside. Loki explained that the sub-boss had been a necromancer disguised as a black-armored knight, resistant to physical attacks. Turning to Alec, he presented a wand with a cross-shaped head, an ancient artifact that transformed into a sword in Alec's hands. Rain eyed it suspiciously, questioning Loki's motives. Loki merely laughed, saying Alec would be the bait in the vanguard. The others were confused until he clarified. Alec's unassuming appearance would lure the real boss closer, giving him a chance to ambush it and seize the glory of defeating an S-ranked monster. As the echoes of battle faded through the cavern, the group steeled themselves. The victory over the sub-boss was only the beginning. The true horror of Floor 64 still awaited them in the shadows ahead. The scene then shifts to the prince who had fired Alec. He and his companions were being chased through a dungeon by two caterpillar monsters. The prince could not comprehend how such a thing had happened, as he had never experienced trouble dealing with these kinds of creatures before. In frustration, he ordered Lainey to eliminate them with magic. She tried, but for some reason her spells failed to activate. The prince, enraged, called her useless and decided to handle the monsters himself. As he turned and swung his sword, the blade bounced harmlessly off the monster's body. Shock spread across his face as he realized his strength had faded. Lainey and the knight hurriedly lifted the prince and dragged him toward the exit while he struggled to make sense of what had gone wrong. His sword strikes had once been powerful and precise, yet now they felt hollow and weak. As he reflected, he noticed that his decline had begun around the same time he expelled Alec from the party. Instead of accepting that Alec had been an important contributor, he convinced himself that Alec must have cursed him in revenge. After escaping the dungeon, the prince went to consult one of the royal magicians, Vogan, to confirm whether a curse had been placed upon him. After a brief magical scan, Vogan informed him there was no trace of a curse. The prince was in disbelief, insisting there had to be one. He would never have struggled on the 30th floor otherwise. Vogan, however, explained that there was an anti-magic field on that level, which would have suppressed any support of enchantments. The magician calmly suggested that the prince had only felt weaker because his support magic was nullified. The prince scoffed, dismissing the explanation and claiming that support magic was the domain of cowards like Alec. Vogan maintained his composure despite the prince's ignorance, but found it strange that Alec had not warned him about the anti-magic field beforehand. After all, Alec was the legendary student who had once reached the 68th floor. The prince laughed off the notion, claiming that such a feat was an absurd rumor spread by commoners. Vogan chose not to correct him, knowing there was no remedy for arrogance. Suddenly, a guard entered the chamber, announcing that the king wished to speak with the prince about the situation involving Alec. The prince smiled confidently, assuming his father would take his side. Upon arrival, the king of Galdana began recounting a story about a man named Eldas, a former court magician he had banished years prior. Eldas, though a noble, had foolishly stood before the king of Galdana and warned that unless the kingdom changed its treatment of commoners and court magicians, a great tragedy would one day befall them. The prince interrupted, declaring that such insolence toward royalty deserved banishment. The king, however, clarified that Eldas was not a fool for his words but for his conviction. After being stripped of his title, Eldas had attended the Royal Magic Academy, silencing his critics through sheer brilliance and graduating as valedictorian. Though he could have pursued wealth or prestige, he chose to return to the castle and serve as a court magician. Even then, he continued to urge the king to change his ways, until his mysterious disappearance a year later. The king admitted that he had long ignored Eldas's warnings, but recent events had made him reconsider. That was the true reason he had ordered the prince to explore the dungeon, to see whether nobles were truly superior to commoners. Judging by the prince's failure, he realized he had been wrong. He declared that henceforth the kingdom would recognize talent regardless of social class. The prince was stunned, arguing that accepting commoners as equals would disgrace their family name. The king acknowledged that he himself was to blame for instilling such beliefs, but insisted that change was necessary. The prince countered that associating with people like Alec only brought misfortune and cited his weakened state as proof. At that moment, a guard entered and presented the remains of a torn book. The king explained that Alec had written a comprehensive guide to clearing the 30th floor for Regulus, but Lainey had destroyed it before he could read it. The prince's expression twisted in disbelief. Unable to bear the truth, he excused himself, claiming illness. After he left, the king quietly asked Vogan to assist Regulus however possible. Meanwhile, Regulus wandered the corridors in turmoil, realizing that if Alec had truly been skilled and insightful, then he himself had been the problem all along. His pride would not allow him to accept that truth, and the realization began to eat away at him. Elsewhere, Alec questioned Loki about his plan, uncertain why he was forbidden from using magic against the dungeon boss. Loki explained that he did not expect Alec to defeat the creature with the sword. He merely wanted him to pose as a melee fighter to catch the boss off guard. The others quickly understood, though Krasia voiced her confusion over the need for such deception. Loki clarified that the boss possessed intelligence on par with humans, which made straightforward tactics dangerous. Alec found it hard to believe but agreed to trust Loki's judgment. With the plan set, Loki requested Krasia's assistance. He intended to teleport them to their allies but lacked the mana to perform the spell alone. But teleportation magic was a guarded national secret, leaving them at risk if discovered. The situation left no room for hesitation. The group decided that if anything went wrong, the blame would fall solely on Loki. While Loki drew the teleportation circle and guided Krasia through the process, Alec turned to Yora, seeking her opinion on Loki's reliability. Yora admitted that she disliked Loki's personality but vouched for his capability. She recalled a large-scale raid 2 years prior that Loki had orchestrated flawlessly, saving countless lives. Encouraged by this, Alec chose to place his full trust in him. When the circle was complete, they stepped inside. For Yora, it was her first time witnessing true teleportation magic. Loki explained that this was a simplified version, calibrated to send them directly in front of the boss. He warned them to be ready for combat immediately upon arrival. With that, he activated the circle, and in a flash, the party vanished. They materialized beside Loki's allies who were locked in battle with the Dark Knight. The two had been holding their ground but were clearly exhausted. Ornus rushed forward to relieve them, engaging the knight while Alec attempted to flank it. The creature reacted swiftly, leaping into the air to avoid the attack before countering with a powerful charge. Meanwhile, Loki and Krasia worked together to evacuate the wounded. The knight's armor was impossibly tough, and though no human form could be seen within, Ornus attacked without hesitation. When the knight tried to leap over him, Ornus pinned its cape to the ground, creating an opening for Alec to strike. His blade severed the knight's head, sending the helmet clattering across the floor. For a moment, it seemed the battle was over, but the knight's body began to move again, sprouting tendrils from its neck. It was an undead headless horseman, a Dullahan, its former steed likely the monster they had slain earlier. Alec's brief moment of distraction nearly cost him dearly. The creature lunged from above, and he barely managed to block the blow. The force of the strike made it clear that the knight had been holding back before. As Alec struggled to hold the line, Yora unleashed a flurry of buffs on Ornus. Empowered, Ornus struck with renewed strength, knocking the knight backward. Yet its armor held firm, and its regenerative abilities made every victory temporary. Moments later, the creature retrieved its severed head, reattached it, and released an ear-piercing scream that rattled the entire chamber. The knight then kicked Alec with tremendous force, sending him hurtling across the room. Before he collided with the wall, Yora erected a barrier to cushion the impact. Alec regained his footing, realizing that without her intervention, he might have died. The knight's mastery of martial arts made the fight far deadlier than expected. Loki, still preparing his final spell, instructed Alec to hold out for 5 more minutes. Though exhausted and nearly out of potions, Alec pushed forward alongside Ornus to keep the creature occupied. When Loki's preparations were finally complete, a massive magic circle illuminated the area. The knight panicked and lunged at him, slashing through his chest, only to discover that the figure was an illusion. The true Loki observed from atop a tower as ice began to form beneath the knight's feet. Ornus stepped into a teleportation trap crafted by Loki and Krasia, reappearing behind the knight to deliver a powerful strike. At the same moment, Marmel descended from above, swinging with full force. Though the knight narrowly evaded her attack, it fell into another ice trap designed to slow its movements. Realizing that Loki was the mastermind, it began climbing the tower to kill him. Loki drew a magic blade and met the charge. Though he had been strengthened by Yora's 7-fold enhancement, the strain on his body was immense and he barely held on. Yora cast a binding spell to restrain the knight, but not before it landed a blow that sent Loki plummeting from the tower. Even as he fell, Loki remained calm. Everything had gone according to his plan. With a faint smile, he called out to Alec, signaling that the stage was set, and it was time to end the battle. Alec unleashed a massive formation of magic circles that lit up the night sky, each one humming with destructive power. Loki stared upward in stunned admiration. Even against their last boss, Alec had never produced magic on this overwhelming scale. But Loki could also see the cost. Alec's body shook violently, fatigue gnawing at every muscle as he forced mana through channels that were already screaming. Still, Alec refused to stop. He braced himself and initiated Thunderbolt acceleration, pouring the last of his strength into the attack. The blast landed cleanly, tearing through the armored Dark Knight and leaving its metal frame twitching. Even half destroyed, the creature strained to break free of the binding spell Yora had cast. Her control faltered under the monster's raw power, and she warned Alec that she could not restrain it much longer. The demand sounded simple: finish it, but Alec was drawing on reserves that no mage should have been able to touch twice in one day. His body wanted to shut down, his vision blurred, but he forced himself through the last cycles of the spell. With a deafening roar, it shot forward in a streak of white-blue light, engulfing the Dark Knight and vaporizing it instantly. Alec collapsed the moment the battle ended, finally surrendering to exhaustion. As he lay on the ground, he found himself quietly realizing how much easier survival became when he had reliable companions. Yora knelt beside him, insisting that they had relied far more on him than he realized. Without his magic, they never would have defeated the creature. Ornus joined them, relieved to see Alec alive and joking that he was glad Alec had returned to being the party's unstoppable powerhouse. But then Ornus abruptly shifted topics, reminding Alec of their earlier bet. Whoever collapsed first would have to accept a dare. Alec had just collapsed, meaning he lost. Fortunately for Alec, Ornus gave him a lenient penalty. From now on, Alec was forbidden from hiding personal issues. Whenever something bothered him, no matter how small, he had to talk to Yora, Krasia, or Ornus. Alec could only nod in weary acceptance. Krista arrived and expressed her gratitude for his efforts, and Marbell, even bolder in her appreciation, kissed Alec on the cheek. The sudden gesture stunned Yorha into speechlessness. Marbell invited Alec to join her in future dungeon raids, but Yorha stepped between them immediately, firmly declaring that Alec was their party's magician and not someone she intended to share. Recognizing how much Alec had contributed, offered to write a formal recommendation for him. Alec blinked in confusion at the mention. Ornus explained that to reach S rank, the guild required not only approval, but also a recommendation from an existing S rank party. He promised to secure the guild master's support as well. With their mission complete, Alec collected the Dark Knight's magic stone and the party returned to the guild. The receptionist congratulated him warmly, mentioning he had become one of the guild's most talked about adventurers. She asked whether he had recovered from his major fight. As he prepared to leave, the guild master approached and informed him that someone from the kingdom of Galdana was waiting for him. Confused, he had no reason to deal with the kingdom anymore. Alec followed her to the meeting room where he found Vogan. Of everyone he had met at the castle, Vogan had been the only one he respected. Alec bowed politely, but Vogan immediately confronted him, demanding to know whether Alec had intentionally allowed Prince Regulus to nearly die by failing to warn him how dangerous dungeon exploration was. Alec responded calmly. Even if he had warned Regulus, the prince would never have listened. Vogan sighed. Alec was right. After Alec's dismissal from the court, Vogan had been forced into his position, a role he described as a waste of his abilities. Alec asked if that meant Vogan had become the prince's official magician. Vogan clarified babysitter was more accurate. After Alec left the castle, Regulus attempted to clear the dungeon's 30th floor alone and was nearly killed. Vogan had hoped to lecture the prince into understanding the consequences of arrogance, but Regulus refused to take responsibility. Instead, he insisted that Vogan escort him to find Alec. Alec realized immediately the prince was already in the city. Vogan confirmed this, stating that Prince Regulus was waiting in the underground training arena. Though Alec had hoped never to see him again, he recognized that this confrontation was inevitable and perhaps necessary. As they descended the arena steps, Vogan mused that the prince's only admirable trait was his refusal to compromise his pride. He found the nobility's obsession with status pointless. Alec reminded him that he too was technically a noble. Titles meant nothing to him. All he wanted was the freedom to live his life. They reached the arena where Prince Regulus stood in the center waiting for him. He began by explaining that the king of Galdana intended to change how the kingdom was governed. Though Regulus disagreed, he accepted the decision to honor his father. Alec felt a flicker of hope that the prince had matured, only for Regulus to immediately ruin it by reaffirming his disdain for taking advice from commoners. Alec pointed out that Regulus's stubbornness had been the cause of all his problems. The prince refused to acknowledge this. When reasoning failed, Regulus demanded a duel, asking Vogan to serve as witness. He charged forward first. Alec intercepted the attack with his wand and was briefly surprised to see the prince wielding daggers instead of a longsword. Years ago, Alec had recommended daggers due to Regulus's small frame, but the prince had ignored him. Now, unexpectedly, he had adopted the advice. It didn't help. Regulus lunged too aggressively, lost balance, and crashed face first into the ground. Alec glanced at Vogan, who shrugged. He had only told the prince that if he wanted to challenge Alec, he would need to prove it in battle. To the prince's credit, he insisted on a fair duel and avoided dirty tricks. His daggers were artifacts powerful enough to break Alec's barrier in one strike, but that was his best achievement. Through months of training, Regulus had realized the truth. Alec's support magic had been the reason he survived the dungeon for so long. After Alec's departure, every attempt at the 30th floor ended in failure. Eventually, he read the restored pages of Alec's report, discovering that everything Alec had written had been correct. Accepting this truth only intensified his frustration with himself. He then demanded that Alec fight him seriously. Before doing so, Alec asked one final question, whether the king truly planned to reform the kingdom. Regulus confirmed it and revealed that their dungeon expedition had been part of the king's test to gauge the true power of common-born individuals. Suddenly, Alec understood why the king of Galdana had always treated him kindly. Realizing his 4 years in the court had not been wasted brought in quiet relief. With every loose end resolved, Alec activated his artifact and charged. Regulus stood his ground, trembling but refusing to retreat. At the last moment, Alec diverted his blow and struck the ground. Regulus demanded to know why. After everything he had done, every insult, every humiliation, he believed Alec would kill him to preserve his pride. Without superiority to cling to, he no longer knew who he was. Receiving mercy instead of hatred left him lost. The absurdity of the situation made Alec laugh softly. He had expected hatred and accusation. Instead, the prince sought guidance. Alec's anger evaporated. Regulus apologized sincerely for everything. Alec accepted, recognizing that the prince's flaws stemmed from upbringing, not malice, and acknowledging them took courage. Regulus returned Alec's old court magician cloak and handed him a letter from the king, an invitation to return to the royal court. Alec declined both, stating he was happiest with his party and would not leave them again. Regulus accepted this but insisted Alec keep the cloak. It was rightfully his. With nothing left to say, he left the arena beside Vogan. A faint smile appeared on his face. Alec watched him go, knowing both of them had finally found closure.